Hello and welcome to another mini lecture from Like Maria. Today we're going to look at Jekyll and Hyde. The focus of today's lecture is how to use context. So we're going to look at four contexts: science, religion, Stevenson's writing, and the Gothic. We're going to do this by looking at an essay question, similar to one you might get in the exam. Write about how Hyde is presented at different points in the novel. And to do this, we're going to start off with a particular focus passage. This passage comes just after Utterson has met Hyde for the first time. He comes away, he's rather disturbed, and he reflects upon the meeting and the attributes that he has discovered in Hyde and his view of Hyde. You can see here that I've highlighted quotes in green, and these are the quotes that I'm going to be using. So just to give you a focus and a framework for this presentation, quotes from the passage are going to be in green. Where I've mentioned context, I've written in red, and then I've written quotes from elsewhere in the text in yellow. So first off, we're going to look at two phrases: hardly human and troglodytic. So the phrase hardly human, used by Utterson, is used to cast Hyde in a comparison, or it's been compared to other humans in the novel, and he is described as less of a human than them. He lacks a human quality, a human intellect, a human sense of morality, and sometimes even a human face or a human stature. He is described as shorter than Jekyll. He doesn't fit into Jekyll's clothes. So he doesn't fit in with the other humans in the novel. There is something about him that prevents him from being fully human. The next reference we get to this in the passage is the use of the term troglodytic. Now, troglodytic is a term that refers to people that inhabit caves or dens. And these, of course, are very primitive people from the early ages of mankind, who would have perhaps even crawled about on all fours. So the use of that troglodytic, again, suggests that Hyde is something of a primitive being. He's not fully developed, and he is rather base in his nature, animalistic, we might say. Now, in terms of context, we can then refer to Charles Darwin, who was writing in the middle of the 19th century, and he wrote about the concept of evolution. He made the suggestion that man had his origins in ape-like or monkey-like beings. Now, obviously, this was problematic for Christians who believed in the creation story in the Bible. But Darwin wrote and explored this idea, and in particular he published a book called On the Origin of the Species, which suggested that man had evolved throughout many millions of years into the full intellectual, spiritual, moral, upright being that he was in the Victorian era. This particular idea of Hyde is followed up in other places in the book. And specifically, I want to refer you to a quote that is used in the description of the Carew murder. Hyde is described as beating Carew to death with ape-like fury. So you can see how there is a connection here with our original passage and Utterson's description of Hyde being hardly human and troglodytic. The next phrases I want to explore come under the context of religion. I'm looking here at how Utterson describes Hyde as having a foul soul, or he is a foul soul, and talks about Satan's signature appearing on his face. The soul, of course, is a religious idea about the spiritual centre of a person. In Christianity, this is supposed to be pure, and here we get the reference to it being foul. There is something festering, something wrong with the soul. It's not pure, it's more likely evil. I like the I rhyme here in particular, O-U-L, O-U-L, which kind of reiterates the connection between the foulness and the soul festering inside Hyde. So to have a foul soul in the Victorian era was particularly bad. The next phrase, Satan's signature upon the face. Satan is another word for the devil. Here there is a suggestion that Satan owns Hyde, or indeed that Satan has created Hyde, that Hyde is not a good Christian person created by God, but a bad, evil person created by the devil. Again, we can see how these references in our passage, Utterson's description of Hyde, are developed throughout the rest of the text. And one particular reference that Victorians would have noticed and made much of is that when we first see Hyde and Utterson meet, Hyde is described as taking a hissing intake of breath. Now this word hissing, with its sibilant s, is reminiscent of a snake. And to a Victorian Christian, anything to do with snake would take them back to the evil devil, Satan, in the Garden of Eden. The snake being evil and tempting Eve, who then tempts Adam and brings corruption into the world. So the association of Hyde with a snake, with the devil, and having a foul soul wraps him in this kind of evil aura. For more information about Satan and the Garden of Eden, you might like to look at the first book of the Bible, the book of Genesis. Okay, next I'm going to look at this idea of, even in the early stages of the book, there being a duality to Hyde. We have here a displeasing smile and a murderous mixture of timidity and boldness. And these two phrases, I would suggest, hint very early on at the fact that there are two sides to Hyde. A smile normally is pleasing, something pleasant, satisfying. Here it is displeasing. There is an oxymoronic quality to this phrase. In a similar way, the mixture of timidity and boldness introduces us to this idea that one character can have two aspects. Can be timid, which is usually quite good, and bold, which can be bad. So very early on, we are told that man is not straightforward, and Hyde in particular has two sides to his character. Context here, I think, is a very interesting one in Stevenson's interest early on about looking, and here it's written in red, at that strong sense of man's double being. This is something he said before writing the book in his notes, that he was interested in exploring man's double being, the two sides of the personality. We might look at a particular play, indeed, that Stevenson co-authored, called Deacon Brodie, that was based on a man in true life who indeed did have this double being. He was an upstanding member of the community, a counsellor on the outside, but underneath this mask he was in fact a gambler and a thief, and he stole money to be able to pursue his gambling habit. So we can see here that Stevenson's interests in these two-sided beings, in that man sometimes had a respectable outside and a less respectable inner being, was something that he was exploring even before he wrote Jekyll and Hyde. I've just mentioned here as well in yellow that quote from Jekyll's confession towards the end of the book, and he had come to the conclusion himself that man is not truly one but truly two. So you can see here this interesting notion which Stevenson was, one might even say, a little bit obsessed with pursuing, of the two-sided nature of man. The last area I'm going to talk about is the way in which the Gothic is introduced into this description. I've highlighted here two phrases, pale and dwarfish, and deformity. These are typical Gothic descriptions. Pale is not right, not healthy, peculiar. Dwarfish is not fully grown, sometimes something magical, mysterious about it. Somebody who has a deformity is not fully formed or not correctly formed, doesn't fit in. So this kind of description is typical of a character from a Gothic novel, somebody who doesn't conform to the healthy image of what a person should be. Throughout the novella, you can see Hyde strikes people as someone who is peculiar. I've highlighted here Dr. Lanyon describes Hyde as abnormal and misbegotten, as if even at birth he wasn't right, and also refers to him as creature. Now, this word creature, I think, is particularly interesting for us. Very famous Gothic novel, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. In this novel, the creature is referred to. Shelley's monster that she creates, Frankenstein's monster, is referred to repeatedly as the creature. So there is a kind of direct link there. Creatures used as describing something that's not quite human, going back to our troglodytic from earlier on. And just another little detail about Gothic descriptions. Often the atmosphere is created by the light of the moon, and often when Hyde appears, it is the case that he is lit by a full moon or enveloped in fog. That's another aspect of atmosphere that's often brought out in this novel. So there is a sense of mystery, of darkness, and little glimmers of light here and there, which serve to enhance the paleness and the deformity of the Gothic character. So I hope that quick review of context has helped to show you how you can include context in your writing, and also if you follow the yellow points throughout the presentation, you'll see how to expand this to the rest of the text. So I hope that you have learnt how to solve a problem like Jekyll and Hyde and its context.